So right now, the pinnacle news of what's going out is tariffs. Had huge amounts of disruption on all global trade lanes. The analyst responsible hid the mistake, hid it for 2 years, and the company's net profits took a hit by $150 million and they had to readjust their EPS as a result of finding that mistake in the data.
Frankie, how did Prodensus come about?
Great question. About 8 years ago, I was working for a very large US multinational company, and I was given an Excel spreadsheet and 11 million rows of data and was asked to put the two of them together. And you know yourself that they won't fit, they'll never fit. I went back to study machine learning, formerly studied in London. And when I went back into my organization, as a millennial and probably the only millennial in the organization at the time, driving that adoption of new technology, of new ways of doing things was slow. We actually managed to leverage machine learning technology to complete the project we were working on. And straight after that, I handed in my notice to go build a company. I built it with my co-founder at the time. He was coming at the business from a slightly different angle from the startup world, and that was, how do we negotiate freight in a certain way that's going to meet the market's needs on a continuous basis? And I think those two ideas sort of collided to build Prodensus.
Why did you feel there was enough of a reason for you to sort of solve that problem?
I think because I was mashing my keyboard on a regular basis, trying to analyze this freight data, genuinely, it's 90% of what I was doing was cleaning spreadsheets. And I was looking at it being like, okay, you need domain knowledge to do this. You need to be pretty handy as a data analyst. You got to have experience. You got to be familiar with the data sets. And I just thought it was a huge non-value add activity being done. And for me, that's really the part that we wanted to automate.
And tell us about your data. How important is getting that data correct? And why is it such a challenge to actually get the data accurate and fit for purpose to use?
So two sides of that question. Why is it important to get correct? I'm actually going to reference a very large US retailer. It's not to bury anybody here, but it's a point of inflection. Back in November of 2024, one of the largest US retailers in the world made a mistake with their freight data. The analyst responsible hid the mistake, hid it for 2 years, and the company's net profits took a hit by $150 million and they had to readjust their EPS as a result of finding that mistake in the data. So there's a huge amount at stake here. Freight is just everywhere. It's $1 trillion industry. So I think that's, I suppose, the buy we do it aspect.
When you look at your customers' success, the impact that you're having with them, tell us about some of the positive impact of the work.
Yeah, I think without wanting to sound overly commercially focused, a lot of it is about making sure the product gets there for the right price. So we would negotiate contracts up to $100-200 million on behalf of our customers, and they would be sitting on mountains of spreadsheets. So the first return that they would get is we remove a lot of that work. It costs about 10 grand in terms of labor hours to clean one of these files. The US Bureau of Labor Statistics has showed a decline in over 25s constantly for the last 10 years. And there's a thing called the logistic brain drain. So capturing that domain knowledge and code of it, I think there's going to be value for the long run. In terms of where they get value is, if you're a company and you've got a data set from company A and data set from company B, and they've never been compared before, those two companies could learn a lot about each other in terms of their freight profiles, their spend, just by having that data in one place. And yeah, I suppose that's the value you bring.
You and the team won at the National Startup Awards. What was that? What was that like, receiving that recognition and getting that award?
Yeah, I think at the time, it was an interesting process to go through. I was trying to move the business away from the procurement tool side of things. We call that rate bait, and to really double down on the AI algorithm data cleaning solution, which is the Datamate. So we were right at the peak of that pivot. And I think winning the award was recognition that if you've got a good use case for AI, that, yeah, the market will notice. I think really it reaffirmed the move, reaffirmed the transition, but it also massively motivated the team because you've spent 4 years building something. It's super complicated. It's endlessly complicated. We're talking thousands of data variables here that have been mapped. Um, and that's without even talking about how complex the algorithms are. Um, I think it was great validation for the team. Really motivation.
There's so much opportunity to use some of these free AI models, so many free AI products and services to start to use. How do you and the team start to weave in what's available and then what you actually use day to day to make an impact to your product?
It's a great question, but the speed at which the evolution's happening in the space is just astronomical. I think you'd have to be continuously looking at the market in terms of what's out there. Every day there's a new model, new feature, new something that's going out. I think you have to do two things. I think you've got to assess your own business's requirements and narrow the list down to 4 or 5 providers out there. Um, and test. Really fail fast, especially in startup land. Everybody says this: fail fast. To use the models to fail fast. Give it a sample of the data, test it, move on to the next one, sample, test it, and you're just going to have to make your bed, but make it so that you can move if you need to into the future. And I think that's the first part. The second part is if you're building a team, some people are just going to be innately in love with technology and data. You need to know who those people are in the organization. You need to be linking in with them regularly. For me, I'm very passionate about certain technologies. I'm very passionate about where AI is going and the impact it's having on the industry. But am I researching it? Am I looking at X every single day? Am I looking at the question on Stack Overflow? It would be unfair to say that I am, but I do have a couple of members of my team that they're really super active in the market, and talking to them every day about what's going on is, that's what you have to do.
So within the product, so we know the attention to detail and journey you're going on with the data. Tell us a little about the work that you do on the algorithms.
Yeah, very simply, what we're trying to do is two things. One is categorization, classification data using an algorithm. And that is using, I suppose, a fuzzy logic. So things are ambiguous in the freight industry. So if you talk to somebody in America, they might call what you pay for a shipment for renting a container, they might call it the line haul rate. And if you talk to somebody in Europe, they might call it the base rate. So language is divisive. The algorithm is trying to figure out, what's the difference within the corpus of logistics freight language as to what makes sense and what doesn't. And then within that, you then need to understand, okay, I've got all of this data. I've relabeled it or labeled it to something correct. Is what's within the data itself correct and accurate? And I think you can build multiple different services, and this is really where you're trying to plot. How would an analyst do it? How would an analyst look at a list of zip codes and clean it up, or a list of city locations? And you have to think like that analyst to build an algorithm to fix those microservice and, I suppose, transactions within the data. So at a high level, two algorithms. At a lower level, there's 60 tables, thousands of variables, and I don't know how many microservices working and operating on full data. But that's really the approach.
And from the collaboration within the Microsoft ecosystem, what's that be like?
Brilliant. We got into it, as I said, my co-founder at the time he was actually former Microsoft. So yeah, look, it did lean our experience. Our first full stack developer was a C# developer, so everything was kind of leaning into Microsoft at the time. But it was only once we got onto the founders hub program that we found a lot of it is heavily weighted towards founders. And I know that sounds ridiculous or redundant because it's in the name, but it's only once you start looking at it, it's like, oh, they've thought about having a CRN license in there, or GitHub Copilot for developers, or even GitHub Enterprise. LinkedIn, the premium LinkedIn membership is in there. And that's not even talking about Azure and the Azure credits. And I think there's a lot to be said for what Microsoft can do on that side, outside of, I suppose, the direct cloud environment. And that's where we've gotten an awful lot of value that we weren't anticipating.
Where do you see the trends happening in freight? But what do you see in the next kind of 6, 12, 18 months? What do you see happening?
Yeah, it's very timely question for you to ask that. Right now, S&P Global is running an event called TPM, which is the Pan Pacific Maritime Organization. It's their event. It's held in LA. It's held in Long Beach every year. And it's where they talk about what's happening in global freight. That literally kicked off on Sunday. Today's obviously Tuesday. So right now, the pinnacle news of what's going out is tariffs. So we've had huge amounts of disruption on all global trade lanes. We saw what happened in the Suez Canal, the Red Sea crisis, Houthis firing missiles at container ships. We had one of the longest potential strike warnings happening on the east coast of America. The ILA were looking at striking. We've had disruptions on Indian trade lanes. But overwhelmingly, what's happening now is we're just looking at how our countries working together and what's happening in the role of tariffs. Where logistics is heading, we've had these huge supply chain trends over the last 10 years. We've had onshoring, nearshoring, reshoring, offshoring was, 20 years ago. I think the next trend that's really going to be driven into all supply chains is something, there's not really a term for it, but it's optionality. I'm sitting on mountains and mountains of data thanks to APIs. If the data is clean and accurate, how do I react quickly? What are my options for my business? So don't force me into a set strategy. Give me 10 options that I can run with and bring back to my own business to come up with a solution. So I think that optionality piece is going to be really key for global supply chains.
Frankie, thank you very much for your time today. Brilliant. Thanks very much, Mark. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mark Kelly, founder of AI Ireland. We're passionate about collaboration and sharing the incredible stories behind every AI journey. That's why we're always looking for guests to join our in-person AI Ireland podcast experience. If you're working on innovative AI projects or have a story that can inspire others, we want to hear from you. This is your chance to share your insights, experiences, and ideas with a really vibrant community that's as excited about AI as you are. So if you're ready to be part of this conversation and help shape the future of AI in Ireland, please get in touch today. We can't wait to collaborate with you. Thank you.